All right, let's get this done so I can cook dinner. Hopefully, it's not an incoherent, rambling mess. So, this guy right here is Aaron Hernandez. He's a rather infamous Major League Baseball umpire. And you might be saying, guy on the internet who I don't care about, and your opinion, what are you rambling about? What does this have to do with politics and unions? Well, you see, Angel Hernandez is a horrible umpire, and he has sued Major League Baseball, um, saying that they're racist because he's Cuban Hispanic and because he can't get promoted. And his lawsuit got thrown out by the courts because Major League Baseball basically had to admit that the reason why he hasn't been promoted isn't because they're racist, it's because he's really bad at his job. And it's so bad that Major League Baseball is attempting to remove human umpires for robots in the field, in the games. Now, here's the thing with sports ball, something like baseball. When you think about it, you think about like it's two teams playing against each other. And then reality, that's not what's going on. The reality of it is there's two teams playing against each other and then another third party that's supposed to be neutral to officiate the game between the two of them. So when you have someone that's really, really bad at their job, like an Angel Hernandez, you effectively have like three independent groups that have their own agenda. And someone like Angel Hernandez, who's basically has on numerous occasions tried to make it look like he's making the baseball game about him and not actually about the two teams that people have paid to see, you kind of might have a problem, right? So the third interest is usually bad. There's a mathematics reason behind that, because the when you have three parties involved with in an interaction, it becomes harder and harder to track the positions of the three parties, and eventually, most of the time, two of the parties will force the third party out of the equation, right? So we have this going on, and I preface this to start off with because so it shows how well I'm ready to go. That the United Auto Workers have gone on strike against the big three auto manufacturers in the country. And there's a lot of nonsense that they're doing. Effectively, all you have to know about a union is if they go on strike, they haven't been doing their job. And if a union goes on strike, you have an adversarial relationship between the union and the employer. Like, that's not a good thing. None of this is a good thing. So then we have our baseball umpire, which is supposed to be our government, come out and say that Biden thinks that the striking workers should get their fair share of the benefits they help create from the companies, right? Now, there's a longer story involving Ford v. Dodge in 1916 court case, shareholders versus dividends and employees. That's a kind of a different way to go. But the long story short of this is the National Labor Relations Board is an independent agency within the federal government that's supposed to be basically facilitating unions, the fair union practices with businesses, right? And that's not what they are, because that's not how our country functions. They're effectively like a an organization that is trying to help out one of the parties within this, and that's the labor, because obviously this is the concept of the deep state. You keep electing certain people, and they appoint people into these positions, and these positions are going to take their own interest into heart, and they're going to weave things a certain direction. It is almost impossible for someone to be neutral in their arbitration process, because they are going to have empathy and they're going to pick a side. And in this case, like, it is much harder to pick the side of the faceless corporation that is being representing, or that is representing the wealthy, than it is the supposed group that is representing the less fortunate worker, right? That's just normal human type nature to pick a side. So we shouldn't even have a National Labor Relations Board in this country, because we shouldn't need to have a neutral third party arbitrating contract negotiations between two groups, because the third party is going to have its own special interest involved with how the contracts go out. Just like we shouldn't have unions that are part of the public sector, because how do you actually have the ability at that point to have any type of neutral arbitration? You're not. So that should be illegal, and it's not. So who cares? But the idea is, again, like, this is the New York Post. New York Post kind of almost tends to skew to the right, but it says that Biden backs auto union and strike for 40% pay hike and 32-hour week. This is a bad headline. Biden didn't actually say that, as far as I can see. The union, the auto union, wants a 40% pay hike and a 32-hour week, and Biden has kind of tacitly picked a side in this, even though some of the people on his own side are saying, "Hey, Joe, what are you doing? Climate change, auto companies are bad. Why are you capitulating to any of this?" So he's kind of caught between a rock and a hard place. But again, how do you have the ability to have a neutral third party when they already have interest? And in this case, we have the 2024 election coming up. So, and another interesting story that's going on out there is the California Senate passes a bill to give striking workers access to unemployment insurance. And they're putting the ball in the court of Governor Newsom, who's a absolute moron. And in this case, the problem behind it is, why would you give taxpayer money to a group that voluntarily left their job and stopped working? Why would anybody work at that point? Why wouldn't anybody just call in and say, like, I'm striking until you give me 500% pay increase and whatever? And then the business, because of having a partial, not impartial umpiring apparatus going on, the business doesn't have the ability anymore just to fire you and move on and pick somebody else, because you have a certain amount of labor rights that exist outside of your ability to negotiate with your employers. And some of you out there might go like, "Oh, that's a good thing," and everything, but it's not, because somebody else is taking away your freedom in order for you to feel like you have that security, right? Now, the other thing is, it sure looks like the state of California, the Senate at least, is picking a side in this employment dispute. Like, and your third party, like the government, shouldn't be picking sides. They shouldn't be choosing, even if it's just like, we're going to put a little pinky toe on the scale. They shouldn't be doing that, because this is two independent parties that should have their privacy respected by the government. And all the government needs to do is make sure that, like, people are obeying by the rules of the game that govern everything, right? So in this case, and I'm trying to look at my notes, the union voluntarily strikes, and then you, the taxpayer, actually get to foot the bill for other people making voluntary decisions. That's how this works. And we're going to get to who the actual neutral arbitrator is supposed to be in this, because it's not who you think, right? So then there's another impeachment. There's two impeachments going on. First, we have the Biden impeachment. And you're going, well, what do unions have to do with these impeachments? Well, you see, we have these two independent bodies, these political parties. One's called the Democrats and one called the Republicans. And they're almost like, one side's almost like, I don't know, an employer, and the other side's like an employee. And then there's like this neutral third party that's supposed to be regulating these two fucking idiots, right? And in this case, there's a Biden impeachment going on. Now, I'm not going to get into the Biden actual impeachment in this, because, well, you're probably partisan and you may or may not know all the details, and I may not know all the details. But anyway, the Republicans have decided that they're going to do an inquiry, right? As my speech impediment comes up. So the House of Representatives have opened an impeachment inquiry into the Democratic President Joe Biden after months of investigation. It's not months, it's years at this point. The FBI and other intelligence apparatuses are just not doing their fucking job. So everybody knows what's going on. No one's doing anything because everything is so corrupt that it doesn't matter anymore. And what the Republicans are saying is they're going to do an investigation into doing an investigation just in time for election season. So convenient of them to pick a side in this. And it's not the country or the voters or the people. It's the union that is the political party that's called the Republicans. Like, they're going to do what's right for the Republican Party and not what's right for the people. So there's another impeachment going down in Texas that just Ken Paxton just was acquitted of this. Ken Paxton being the Attorney General of Texas. And again, I'm not going to go into the details of this because honestly, I don't know, other than Ken Paxton is either really corrupt or partially corrupt, because it involves him being a douchebag involving whistleblowers. But there's also an investigation into him from 2015 that has to do with insider trading. My head hurts everybody's corrupt to a certain degree. It just depends on if you're corrupt to such an extent that it gets in the way of you being able to do your job. You know, again, there's no such thing as a neutral third party. A third party always has their own interests. I can't blame a parent for choosing their kid over other people's kids, even though we know that's wrong, right? Depending on the situation, I should asterisk that. So anyway, what's going on there is basically Ken Paxton may or may not be corrupt. I already said that, but the Democrats don't actually care because he's the enemy. And what happened in the end, because part of this was brought on by the actual Republicans, some of the Republicans in Texas, there's a anti-MAGA thing going on there. Texas may or may not go blue, but it may or may not go blue because of how much election fraud they have going on down there. The Republicans don't actually care about any of this, and neither do the Democrats, because they're both looking at each other like they're opposing teams in a baseball game, and they just need to figure out a way to beat each other. So it doesn't actually matter. So now we go to the next interesting thing, that you have absolute moron Lauren Boebert, who is a representative out of Colorado, and she got caught last weekend fondling her date in some type of play, Beetlejuice show, something stupid. I don't care. Now, there's video of her doing this with her date. She came out and said this is not her values. Obviously, it's her values because she went out and did this, and we're electing people like this because we're not selecting for traits of good leaders. We're selecting for absolute clowns to run our country. That's on us as people, because, as I wrote down here at the bottom, there's no need to actually fix elections when the people are too stupid to actually not let, to select good candidates. Like, who cares? But in this case, like, Boebert's an idiot. And it just so happens that the camera happened to be pointed right at her as she's fondling her date. Well, you go, well, what's this have to do anything? Well, you see, there's this Democratic candidate for Virginia House District that's going on because she has decided that she was selling sex acts with her husband online, and then she got caught. That's basically the long and short of it. Now you go, well, what does this have to do with Lauren Boebert? Well, you see, as this ad pops up, the Associated Press allegedly, for legal purposes, allegedly alerted Susanna Gibson a week ago that the story was going to break, and they had her videos. So it just so happened that they had the ability to catch Lauren Boebert on camera groping her date because she's a moron, to get in front of the other moron that's screwing her husband on the internet for money, just in the same way that, like, we have a Republican attorney general who's corrupt as fuck getting out of an impeachment investigation because the Boston Red Sox circled the wagons against the New York Yankees, because the other Boston Red Sox are circling the wagons, getting ready for election season, because it doesn't actually matter if Joe Biden is corrupt and incompetent, and filling his National Labor Relations Board with people that may or may not have their own agenda. So actors and writers in California can get their unemployment because they voluntarily stop working because fuck them. And Biden picks a side in another strike because hey, who has the interests of the workers at heart? It's not the union, because the unions are actually money laundering firms for the DNC. If you don't believe me, you should look up the teachers union. And anyway, now we're back to Angel Hernandez being a piece of shit, and baseball games aren't actually games between two opposing teams. They're actually games between three independent parties with their own motivations. So in this case, like, who is the neutral arbitrator supposed to be? Well, there's a quote someplace about, like, the smallest minority being the individual, and the government isn't actually supposed to be the neutral arbiter. You see, in this country, we're a constitutional republic, a democracy within a republic. The government is supposed to be the representation of you. The Senate actually is supposed to be the representation of the state. Anyway, the neutral arbiter in all of this is supposed to be us, right? Because again, like I said, there's no need to fix elections when we're too stupid to actually elect the right people. because when we have a corrupt Ken Paxton, corrupt Joe Biden, a moron, and another moron. And I wish I had a picture of good old Sienna Gibson. She's kind of actually attractive, even though she's a huge slut. But who cares? Because that's the state of the world. And hopefully you can understand how three bodies that try and interact with each other, they're going to be pulled in different directions because of the fact that like they're all going to have their motivations. And if you have a union representing you as the individual, then that is the third party with your interaction with your employer, and they're not going to pick your best interest at heart. No, no, no. Why would they do that? Because if someone has money in the game, metaphorically, well, not to point out that say like Angel Hernandez bet on baseball games, but to say that like I don't know if a father has a son that's selling the country out to certain oil interests in Ukraine, he may not have the best interests of the country at heart. So anyway, that's all I got for today. It's been about 16 minutes, and maybe I'll come up with something tomorrow.